last year Florida State went 5-7. Now for FSU fans, you're going into year 3 under head coach Mike Norvell. And you're probably saying, okay, Mike Norvell, you've been here for the last couple of years. We cut you some slack. We understood that this wasn't going to be an overnight rebuild. We understood that this was going to take some time. But now, in 2022, we need you to show us something. We need to at least make it to a bowl game. So how good is Florida State football going to be this upcoming college football season? Now, their over-under win total right now is at 6.5 wins. And I definitely think that 6 wins is the floor for Florida State. I think that the ceiling could be 8 or 9 wins, depending on how much quarterback Jordan Travis develops. We already know that he is a phenomenal athlete. When he decides to tuck the football and run, he's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in America with his rushing ability alone. However, the knock on him has been his accuracy and how good he is as a passer. Now, if Jordan Travis improves, which I believe that he will, I think that Florida State could end up being really good. And I think they could end up being a little bit better than what people are giving them credit for. And the thing with Jordan Travis is that we already know that he is a great athlete, but he has to be able to throw the football downfield efficiently if Florida State's offense is really going to be able to get things rolling. We know that the run game is still going to be pretty productive, despite the fact that they did lose Corbin to the NFL. You do have Trayshawn Ward, Trey Benson, who is a transfer from the University of Oregon. And then on top of that, we know that Jordan Travis is also going to have a big impact in the rushing department as well. So the run game is still going to be really solid. However, the two biggest questions when it comes to the offensive side of the football for the Seminoles is going to be the offensive line and the wide receiver position. Now, when it comes to the offensive line, this has been a big issue for FSU ever since Jimbo Fisher first left. He left the offensive line in a very bad spot, and FSU has trying to rebuild the offensive line ever since he left. And you're hoping that the offensive line is finally figured out. You do have a good amount of pieces there. I think judging from what the coaches have said after spring, they have a couple of spots that they have an idea about who's going to be starting, but they're still trying to figure out things. They're still moving guys around, trying to figure out the best lineup going into the 2022 college football season. However, if you are a Seminoles fan, you're probably saying, JT, we don't need great offensive line play this season. As a matter of fact, we're not expecting great offensive line play. You're probably just saying, just give us decent. Just give us average to maybe above average offensive line play, and that should be good enough, which I think could potentially be true, even though you do play Clemson, who has probably the best defensive line in college football. So I don't think that having a average offensive line is going to be good enough to give you a chance against them. However, when you look at the rest of your competition, I think that your offensive line should be able to hold up if it's able to at least be average. Now, if it's above average, then hallelujah, praise the football gods. But I think the offensive line should finally be able to come around. I think that this probably will be the best offensive line that FSU has had in the last couple of years. Look at wide receiver. The wide receiver position isn't bad. It's not great, but you do have enough pieces there who should be able to get the job done. You have Malik Mclean, who is 6'4", 210 pounds. He showed some flashes of potential last season. Despite the fact that he had limited playing time, he caught 16 receptions for 190 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. You have Ontario Wilson, who was the team's leading receiver last year in yards and touchdowns. He brings experience and a veteran presence to that receiver room. You have Johnny Wilson, who I'm really excited to see what he can do if he gets on the field. He is a transfer from Arizona State. This dude is massive. He's 6'7", 225 or 230. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that he hasn't been moved to tight end yet. But when you have somebody that has this size, He may not be the greatest route runner. He may not be the best when it comes to getting off the line, but you don't really need him to be, because all you really need him to do is just to run deep routes, run some flies, some post routes, and then you have Jordan Travis throw the football up in those 50-50 one-on-one matchups and let him go work. Especially in the red zone. He could end up being a very great red zone target for this FSU offense. So I'm excited to see if Johnny Wilson is able to carve out a role on the Seminoles offense this year. You also have Keyshawn Hilton, Ja'Kai Douglas. So there's some talent in the receiver room. It may not be a group that's going to blow you away, but you do have enough there that you should be able to get the job done. On the defensive side of the football, I think this is going to be where a big question is going to be at, because you lost a good amount of pass rush production. You lost Thomas. You lost Jermaine Johnson, who got drafted late in the first round by the New York Jets. But you do have Derek McClendon. And I think that Derek McClendon could end up being one of the more breakout names in the ACC this year, because remind you that he only had 3.5 sacks last year. He was behind Thomas and Johnson. So imagine what he's going to do with more reps, more opportunities. I think that he could end up having a breakout year where maybe he ends up having 8, maybe 9 sacks. Then your defensive line, you also do have Robert Cooper, Fabian Lovett there. But what has me excited the most about the Seminoles defense are the linebackers. Because I was reading a lot of quotes from Florida State coaches, and every one of them raved about the linebacker room. As a matter of fact, judging from the optimism, this probably is the best linebacker room that Florida State has had. And sometimes you have Tatum Bethune, who is a transfer from the University of Central Florida. He's one of the better linebackers in the American Athletic Conference. You have Kalen DeLoach, DJ Lundy, Amari Gaynor there. So you have a very talented group, a group that has a lot of experience. And I think that this linebacker room is going to be really big in terms of how well this defense is going to play this year. At cornerback, you don't really know. Outside of Amarion Cooper, who also could be in for a breakout season, you don't really know who's going to emerge behind him. You don't really know who's going to be your second cornerback, who's going to be your slot. So those are still things that we have to wait and see how it plays out during fall camp. We also can't forget about safety Jamie Robinson, one of the best safeties in the ACC. So overall, you look at FSU and you look at their schedule, right? It's kind of hard to judge just how many games they could win this year, because there's not really a matchup that you can really look at and say, oh yeah, these are games that we are really confident that Florida State should be able to win, outside of their first game of the season. And you get to play Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Louisiana. We pretty much expect them to be able to win those games, but you know, we expected them to beat Jacksonville State last year. We know how that went. I'm not going to keep talking about it because I know you FSU fans want to get that memory out your head. But I think that the LSU game is really big. And I don't think it's a program-defining game for Florida State, but I do think that this is going to be kind of one of those career-defining games for head coach Mike Norvell. Because think about it. LSU with Brian Kelly, I don't think that they're expecting big things right away from him. I think that they're giving him a lot of time. So if he loses that game, I don't really think that he's going to get a lot of backlash. But if Mike Norvell loses, I think that a lot of people are going to start kind of thinking about bringing out the pitchforks. You may start to hear the hot seat talk start to heat up. So if FSU can win that matchup against LSU, I think that it would give them a lot of momentum, because then you go into conference play 2-0, and that game against LSU is pretty big. You get what I'm saying? Regardless of how good or bad LSU may be this season, it's still a very big game because it's really early in the season, and a win there can give you a big boost in the locker room and give you a lot of momentum moving forward. Then you have to enter conference play, and conference play is where things get kind of tricky, because when you look at FSU's schedule, there's not really a game that you can say, oh yeah, JT, like, we're definitely going to beat Louisville. We're definitely going to beat Boston College. Wake Forest, hell yeah, we're going to beat Wake Forest. Like, every single game on the schedule is kind of a toss-up in a sense. That Louisville game, you play them on the road. That could go either way. Boston College is pretty solid. That could be a coin flip. Wake Forest, we know how good they were last season. NC State, Clemson, that 3-game stretch, not even that. That stretch after that LSU game to enter conference play is not easy at all. And then you started off on the road as well, so that's not an easy stretch, man. Boston College, Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson, that's pretty difficult. Now, you do get the luxury of playing Georgia Tech, who many people expect to be one of the worst teams in this conference. I think their over-under win total was only 3.5, so you should be able to win that game. You got to play Miami. Miami looks to be really good this year. And then you get to play Syracuse, Louisiana, and Florida to close out the year. So, for me, my expectation is 7 wins. Anything less than 6 would surprise me because I definitely think that this roster is good enough to at least win 6 games. They should be able to become bowl eligible. And they potentially could end up winning 8 or 9. As I mentioned earlier, it just really depends on how much Jordan Travis improves as a passer, because I like Jordan Travis and I actually think that he's going to be in for a really big year. I might end up making a segment about him later on down the road, but for me, 7-5 is going to be my record prediction for the Florida State Seminoles this season. I think in 2023, that could be the year that the Seminoles finally return and they end up starting to really compete for the ACC. But I think for right now, 7-5 is what I'm going to go with. Let me know how you guys are feeling about the Florida State Seminoles going into the 2022 college football season down in the comment section down below.